So before I start, and I'm going to introduce myself, Eileen's going to introduce herself. I thought we could introduce each other, but I didn't prepare you for that, so we won't do that. I want to say that we really envision this as a discussion, a conversation. So we have things that we can talk about, but you will have many things that you want to talk about. And this is a real conversation. And I want to thank Jennifer for putting this together and getting us together and just facilitating the whole thing and making it possible. And Molly also, who is or is not here, I can't tell. And we're just going to go around. What was that?
You're okay.
Okay.
Molly, I was just saying hello. My camera's not working.
Oh, okay. We're going to go around, introduce ourselves, and I'm going to ask each of you when you introduce yourself to just say whatever you want about yourself, but also say what kind of questions or issues you want to explore today. It can be with Baldwin, thinking with Baldwin, things in Baldwin that do or don't speak to you, or something related. It doesn't have to only be Baldwin. So I'm Sandy Zagarel. I am kind of retired and not retired from Oberlin College. And well, I'm formerly retired, but still teaching. And I've had the incredible pleasure of being kind of facilitating book discussions at the Sandusky Public Library for, I think it's close to 30 years now.
Oh my God.
And we're very lucky to have her.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and I have taught American Lit of all kinds, some British Lit, and what's called book studies. So the history of the book, readership, etc. And Eileen and I go back to 1985, right?
Yes.
Oh, Eileen, it's on you now.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Julian. I'm from New Orleans, which is a kind of critical part of my story. I've bounced around at some different institutions, Boston University. I've been out of the country quite a bit. I did a Fulbright in West Africa and Senegal to set up a research center there some years ago. But I've been at IU since really 1992. I came that first year just to see whether or not I could do the Midwest. And I've been here ever since. And I actually got my degree from University of Wisconsin, which I loved, which was part of the reason I thought I would try this. I teach a lot of literature, film from Africa, about Africa. Actually, my degree is in French literature. And I do courses that look at the French European zone, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas. And right now I'm doing a course called Black Paris, and Baldwin is one of the star attractions of that course. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I've just been dealing with Baldwin this past week. So it's nice to meet you all, to be here for this conversation. Thank you.
I don't know what order it's on the screen. I only know what order it's on my screen.
Okay, Byron, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, well, I'm Byron Craig. I'm a professor at Illinois State University in the School of Communication. I actually did my PhD at IU. I never had the honor of taking a class with Dr. Julian, so it's nice to be here with you. Yeah, exactly. And my area is race, visual rhetoric, and trauma. That's what I look at, and it's interesting. I didn't know this was going to be set up like this, but actually, when I was teaching at North Carolina A&T, I actually did a book talk. We had a series on Baldwin, and I actually did a discussion on one of his books, and we can talk about that a little bit later.
Tell us which book.
It was The Evidence of Things Not Seen, and it was about the trial of Wayne Williams in Atlanta during the missing and murdered children case in Atlanta, and where I was actually a freshman at Morehouse College when all this was going on. So I kind of have a personal connection to it, but Baldwin does a great job with talking about the city of Atlanta and the politics of Atlanta and race in Atlanta. So, and I'm also from Sandusky, Ohio, so it's really nice to be here. Sandusky Public Library means a lot to me as a kid growing up and being in the library. So And also, like I said earlier, Molly and I've known Molly since I was a kid, so it's nice to be
Thank
here.
you for being,
Thank you.
thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to Eileen, our other Eileen.
Yeah, Eileen Guy. I've been privileged to participate in the book discussions at the Sandusky Library for decades now, and have especially enjoyed Sandy's guidance of those conversations. I got unfortunately got the reading list a little late, but was interested in what you all think of what Baldwin would think about the term African American. The two readings that I did do were both from 1953 and 1960. And our terminology has changed. And I'm interested in what you all think he would make of that and make of the ensuing decades.
Okay, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bill, we'll move on to you. Bill? Sorry, it's okay. Hi, Bill.
Hi
Bill.
there. My name is Bill Glass Jr. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I went to Sandusky High School. I went 2 years at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and then finished up at my Green State University. I'm here today just to listen to the conversation. I know I read a book on Baldwin years ago. I don't remember the name of it. Something about a mountain. Go tell it on the mountain. And I just purchased a book on Kindle recently by Eddie Glaude Jr., who has doing a study and biography on Baldwin. So I'm just happy to be here on the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Darwit, we'll move on to you. Are you there, Darwit?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
But we
Okay,
can't see.
I practically missed everybody except for I got Mr. Glass. My laptop, I'm trying to download it, but then as now I can't. Now
got you
as,
on here
when
twice.
the lady from, okay.
Hello?
I missed I'm on the laptop, but the laptop I couldn't hear anyone. So I hope I'm not giving
okay.
reflex. But anyway, I missed everybody's introduction except for Mr. Glass. Anyway, I'm from Sandusky. I've been going to these book reviews for quite some time, and I kind of missed them. That's one of the bad things about the pandemic. I really missed running my mouth. When I was at Ohio State, one of my Black Studies professor loved James Baldwin. We had to read everything. Okay, now my laptop is back up.
Okay. Now we can't hear you.
Ooh.
We still got you, Eileen. You're okay. Yeah.
So maybe we should come back to Darwin.
We'll come back to Darwin.
Yeah, when his technology decides to cooperate.
Yeah. Sarah, how about you? Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I've been part of the book discussions practically since they began. Sandy is a terrific discussion leader.
Thank you.
And so I'm just here to listen.
Do you have anything you would like to explore, Sarah, or ask questions about?
It is such a historical problem. I don't know how we can ever get out of it. I lived in Louisville as a child, so I saw segregation, separate bathrooms and drinking fountains, and really didn't think much of it when I was a child. Now, I don't know. I didn't see it as the degradation that it was.
Mhm.
I just sort of accepted it, which I think a lot of people did. So it's such a deep problem. I don't know how we can get out of it. So that's where I am.
Good.
Looking ahead.
Molly?
Hello, I'm Molly Carver, and I work with Jennifer at the library. I'm in my second stint at the library. I apologize that my camera isn't working because I'm on my iPad, and I guess I have some older version, and WebEx isn't doing that. So apologies for that. Thanks to everyone for being here. I'm really pleased to have this discussion going today. I appreciate Jennifer setting it up, and I want to thank both of our presenters, Eileen and Sandy. And I'm also from Sandusky. As Byron has already mentioned, I've known him since childhood. We went to the same elementary school, and we don't have to say when. But I grew up here, and I think I think fondly of my childhood experience, and it may have been somewhat naive because we were all just friends going to school together, and that's how it seemed. So it's much more complex, obviously. I didn't come with any particular questions. I'm currently reading 400 Souls, which is an interesting new book that has many authors involved. So I'm working my way through that. I'll turn over to the next person, and thank you again for being here.
Terry, thanks for joining us. It's your turn. You can just introduce yourself and tell us if you have any questions that you want to answer.
Hi, I'm Terry.
Hello.
I'm from Sandusky, and it's good to see everyone. I found the readings just really good, and really enlightening, but hard to get through. But a lot of good information, and a couple questions I had were I'm really interested in his comparison of the way African Americans are treated in Europe as opposed to United States. I found that whole thing just interesting. I had a hard time picturing that. But my daughter's been in Europe, and she keeps saying things are a lot different there, and especially in the political realm. And I think Sarah voiced this. I would really be interested to think of what Baldwin thinks of the current political situation. I just finished reading, I'm a latecomer to reading Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I don't know, there's just a lot of questions about what he would think of the current situation. So thank you for arranging this.
You're welcome. Thank you, Terry. Darwin, did you want to finish anything up?
No,
We kind of cut you off.
It keeps messing up, so I'll just
Darwin.
I'll just chime back in and chime in.
Okay. And I see Eileen's having some problems. We
Eileen,
see you,
have-
Eileen. We see
Well,
you.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can anybody else hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we got you.
Okay, that's good because I can't see anyone. I don't know what went wrong. I
Okay.
can't see anyone, but I can see myself, but I can't see any of you. And I
Okay.
only just heard the last speaker who talked about the Michelle Obama book and her daughter. That was the only thing I've heard after I blanked out. I don't know if you saw me when I left, but at any rate, let's
Okay.
just go on. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So Eileen,
So-
you and I talked about something that Eileen Guy also raised. We thought we would talk about terms to start with.
Yes. I was there
Remember?
for that. The African American term. Yeah.
So there were
yeah.
a bunch of terms that we wanted to talk about, and we actually didn't include African American because we were thinking about the terms that Baldwin used.
Right.
So
Right.
any place you want to start?
So so we're going to begin with the whole question of names and then move on to maybe the fiction or another things after that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think personally that I'm not sure Baldwin would approve of African Americans, actually. And I think because for him, the all-encompassing term is Americans. And what that term has typically stood for forever. I mean, truly forever, only until recently, before we started saying Irish Americans, Polish Americans, African Americans, it really stood for white Americans. When he says Americans, he means white Americans. And I think to attach African Americans as somehow to indicate that, in fact, there is an Americanness, and then there are these additions to that. There are these, slight adjustments to that. I think what Baldwin wants is a unified Americanness. And I'm not sure that African American, in fact, I don't like African American as a term personally, so I don't tend to use it. But my feeling is he would find that a kind of way of, tinkering with the term. And I think that isn't in the spirit of what he's looking for when he talks about white Americans, Black Negro coming together and changing the nature of things. I think it's a term that steps to the side of the real issue. Personally,
I agree with that, and I think that his use of the word American actually has a lot of different meanings depending on when he's using. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
When he talks about Americans, a lot of the time, for example, in The Fire Next Time, I see it with quotation marks around it because he's talking about white Americans. And white Americans are the people who think they are America. Right? When he's writing, he publishes this, I think, in the whole book in 1965. So it's an intense civil rights movement. But he's been, Eileen, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I'm
Okay.
listening intently because I fully agree with that. I mean, even in his earlier essays, when he says Americans, he means white Americans. But he thinks that white Americans are wrong in thinking that they are the Americans, and the rest of us are just added spice, Johnny come lately. Oh, you're back for some reason. I now see several of you.
Not even,
I don't know if you-
but in the case of what he calls the Negro, not included. But what he's also arguing, and so, his language in Terry, you said it's pretty challenging, and it is, especially in the essays, because he's not telling you what to think. He'll tell stories like the story of visiting the Nation of Islam, or how he grew up in Harlem and became a young adult preacher. But he also has almost visionary and somewhat abstract and very imaginative statements and almost riffs and visions that you have to kind of flesh out. He doesn't tell you exactly what he means, but there are points when he has these amazing, almost nuggets. So he goes into this more in other places, but I think this might be in The Fire Next Time. He says, the Negro is a peculiarly American invention.
Yeah, that's quite profound.
And he uses the word Negro. He uses that repeatedly. He doesn't use black usually, and he doesn't capitalize it, of course, because that's more recent. And he doesn't use African American. But what does he mean? This gets right to the heart of what you're asking, Eileen. What does he mean? What do you think he means? How does that strike you? The Negro is a peculiarly American invention. There are no Negroes. We talked about this, but that word Negro doesn't, and that history and concept and state of being only exists in the USA.
Yes, I think that's
cool.
I think that's absolutely correct. There aren't Negroes in Africa. There aren't Negroes because Negro grows out of really because it isn't equivalent to skin color or to degrees of skin color. It really is a product of an American imaginary. The Negro is a product of the American, in Baldwin's old sense, the American imaginary. The Negro is produced by the status of the Negro vis-a-vis white. The Negro is produced by the labor that Negroes do, the resources that they don't have. The Negro is an invention that is completely resonant with the American experience. I mean, I'm not sure what else to say. There are no Negroes in Africa unless they go visit there. So
But to you guys, and that might be a shocking thought to some of you, because you think, well, there are Black people everywhere. So what has created the Negro in America? What is he getting at? Part of what Eileen talked about, but it's when you first read that, this is something that he also says the Nation of Islam has made a really central point, right?
Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah Muhammad says, the so-called American Negro. So what's that about? How does that, what are your questions about that? How does that hit you?
Can I jump in for a second?
Please do. That's what I'm inviting you.
Yeah, I think one of the things one of the things to remember about Baldwin is that throughout his writing and his essays, Baldwin is chastising America the entire time in his writing, right? That's one of the things that Baldwin does, is chastise it in a way that is, what we could think of as in a loving manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Serious manner also, right? To get this point across. And, just thinking back at my reading at Baldwin, and I can't, for some reason, I'm not able to put chat. I can't chat with everyone in the chat box. I've been entering some stuff in there. But Eddie Glaude was just at ISU in February talking about his book, right? I got to host him. And but one of the things I think it's important is that, these are urgent lessons. And so when we think about this notion of Blackness, the Negro, the African American, and picking up what Dr. Julian was saying, the other thing about this coming up with this term is that it says, to make it plain, this was a white invented term, right? White invented in order to explain slavery, explain this this abuse of labor, right? And to name this, from a rhetorical viewpoint, to name this other. Right. And so you have to name the other in order to demonize the other, in order to make the other seem less than human. And that's what a lot of that history comes from, that also. And this is something, Glaude gets into this in his book, but, and keeping in mind that Baldwin not only, for example, in the Evidence of Things Not Seen, he's also critiquing Black folk in America. Right, because he goes to town on Atlanta, and at that time in Atlanta, like I was talking about earlier in the 80s, Atlanta was trying to develop itself as the city that doesn't hate, right? We go by all these monikers, right? These rhetorical terms, but looking at class also, right? That was also an important issue with Baldwin, looking at this notion of class. But to stick with the term. in that term Negro. And I love the way you talked about that, Dr. Julian. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. But it's also, understand that this comes from, a history of whiteness and white oppression in the United States, right? To name these things, to put names on the other in order to keep the other in their place. So, I think we have to keep that in mind also. And it's also Baldwin's way of chastising, right? There's this great article out now and I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but Henry Louis Gates is talking about when he went to France to interview Josephine Baker and James Baldwin, right? And they're talking about being expatriates and why they felt they had to leave the United States, right? And I think a part of that has to do with, again, these terms, right, that America places on Black folk. And it's still relevant today. Because I can't say how often I've thought of leaving the US, right? Because I know those terms have a deeper meaning to them, who they're created by.
Yeah. Let's hear if anybody else has any. So did it surprise people to come across this? He uses it, as you say, he uses it as a term of chastisement. Eileen Guy?
I wanted to say something, which is that because the Negro isn't in America, the invented Negro in America isn't just color. It's poverty, it's fatness, it's loudness, it's colorful clothes, it's shaking and dancing. It's a whole set of behaviors that that are seen to be somehow not quite at the level of civilization, the Negro. Right. And it's remarkably resonant with with Bobby Kennedy's comment about in 40 years the Negro will be we can imagine a president. And then Baldwin is pissed about that. It's not only in his book, he says it on the he says it in the whatever interview or whatever when he was talking. Because the point is, the real point of that comes in his next sentence where he says, why should we believe that, that Negroes need to come up to the level of civilization of whites? Because then he's condemning the level of civilization of whites, which he finds is not particularly civilized at all. So it's a full panoply of behaviors, of attitudes that whites would seem to think that Negroes have naturally, which, and in fact, there's a fabulous novel out of Martinique called Black Shack Alley or Sugarcane Alley. Some of you might have seen the film, where the narrator says, where did Negroes ever laugh like they laugh in these ridiculous films from the 30s, the vaudeville? Where did they ever look like that? Where did they ever behave like that? The point being that, and even if you think about blackface, what blackface does, what vaudeville does, those are behaviors that are heaped upon the Negro or interpreted as Negro, when in fact they're invented behaviors. They're not the Negroes' behaviors. They're the behaviors that white America thinks are the Negroes' behaviors and goes to great extents to produce. So,
right.
Yeah.
Maybe we should bracket the rest of this and come back to it, because I know we want to talk about this evening so soon. But I'm going to do two things. I'm going to, one, just raise something that's come up pretty much anyway, which is if Negro is invented and it's an American state of being, set of characteristics that are imposed on people, but it's ensconced in history, the way Sarah was saying, in law, in slavery, in the economy, in culture. You see it everywhere, even if we don't call it Negro anymore, because that seems like it's a slightly, I don't know, questionable term. What does that say about what white Americans are? What is the relationship, we'll come back to this, between the kind of shaping and creation of Negro by white people and the creation and shaping of whiteness. They're not separate. Whiteness is not just something in itself with its own being. Baldwin argues over and over and shows over and over that it's always constructed, as he says in the letter to his nephew, in relation to how white Americans shape and create and think about and project onto Black people as Negroes. So we'll come back to that. But there are two quotations that I wanted to frame this with, and then let's talk about this meeting this evening so soon. One is from William Faulkner, and it's from his novel Requiem for a Nun. It's a pretty famous quotation. You may have heard it because Obama used it, but slightly changed it. It's 1951. And he's reflecting on the past, on the legacy of, especially in the South, of race, racism, slavery, chivalry, the chivalric white person. The past is never dead. It's not even past. The past is never dead. It's not even past. Now that could mean you can't do anything about it. That's not what Baldwin thinks at all. So Baldwin, both in The Fire Next Time and the notes of the film, I Am Not Your Negro, also a very interesting title, and I'm paraphrasing here. He says, we need to change our world, right? That's clear to everybody who reads Baldwin. But we can't change it unless we understand. And we can't understand it unless we understand the past, which he defines in The Fire Next Time as the Negro past. So Americans cannot think their own history is, settling at the Massachusetts Bay Colony or whatever it is, at the city on the hill. And we have to understand the past because the past continues to play out in the present. The past is not dead. It's not even past. So Baldwin writes a lot of what you read in the 60s, the 50s and 60s. That film is made. He dies in 87. The film is based on something he was working on when he died, but obviously a lot of the clips are, it's all put together by Zagarel Park. But these stories, really, to use your word, they just, stories, the Fire Next Time, it's incredibly resonant. And then you want to take us into The Fire Next Time?
The Fire Next Time?
I'm sorry, no. This morning, this evening, so sorry.
Okay, I'll do my best. Oops. Okay, yes, here we've got the text here. Let's see. It's on your page. That was okay, this is it. Do you all see it? And this was true. Here he's in this paragraph, he's talking about the rage that he senses in the music of North Africans in Paris, the rage that he senses. He says it's the only thing he was sure he understood, but he himself could never hate the French because they left me alone, and I love Paris. I will always love it. It is the city which saved my life. It saved my life by allowing me to find out who I am. And for me, that's quite resonant because I used to say a lot to African American students, go out of the country, go see other things, because you need to see how things work in other places. So what I would like us to do is just to read about 2 or 3 paragraphs, starting with "It was on a bridge." That's the first part of this quote that I suggested, that I proposed. And then I want to, after we talk about that, I'd like us to look at one or 2 paragraphs towards the end of that quote, the several pages I suggested, if we have time, because it seems to me that those 2 paragraphs, in some sense, are opposite. They're talking about a particular experience of being fully human, and then a particular experience of whiteness playing in the dark, as Toni Morrison put it so eloquently in her book, Whiteness, Playing in the Dark, Whiteness and the Literary Imagination. So I wanted us to look at those 2 passages if we have the time. And I think we need to read it, because I don't think, at least these couple of paragraphs, because I think we won't get the real sense of it. Would someone like to read it, or should I just read it, or how should we do that?
Why don't you read it, Eileen, and then we can follow along.
Okay, all right. Okay, then I'm actually going to read it out of my little book here. Okay. All right. It was on a bridge, one tremendous April morning, that I knew I had fallen in love. Harriet and I were walking hand in hand. The bridge was the Pont Royal. Just before us was the great horloge, high and lifted up, saying 10 to 10. Beyond this, the golden statue of Joan of Arc, with her sword uplifted. Harriet and I were silent, for we had been quarreling about something. Now, when I look back, I think we had reached that state when an affair must either end or become something more than an affair. I looked sideways at Harriet's face, which was still. Her dark blue eyes were narrowed against the sun, and her full pink lips were still slightly sulky, like a child's. In those days, she hardly ever wore makeup. I was in my shirt sleeves. Her face made me want to laugh and run my hand over her short dark hair. I wanted to pull her to me and say, "Baby, don't be mad at me." And at that moment, something tugged at my heart and made me catch my breath. There were millions of people all around us, but I was alone with Harriet. She was alone with me. Never in all my life, until that moment, had I been alone with anyone. The world had always been with us, between us, defeating the quarrel we could not achieve and making love impossible. During all the years of my life until that moment, I had carried the menacing, the hostile, killing world with me everywhere. No matter what I was doing or saying or feeling, one eye had always been on the world, that world which I had learned to distrust almost as soon as I learned my name, that world on which I knew one could never turn one's back, the white man's world. And for the first time in my life, I was free of it. It had not existed for me. I had been quarreling with my girl. It was our quarrel. It was entirely between us. It had nothing to do with anyone else in the world. For the first time in my life, I had not been afraid of the patriotism of the mindless, in uniform or out, who would beat me up and treat the woman who was with me as though she were the lowest of untouchables. For the first time in my life, I felt that no force jeopardized my right, my power to possess and to protect a woman. For the first time, felt that the woman was not, in her own eyes or in the eyes of the world, degraded by my presence. The sun fell over everything like a blessing. People were moving all about us. I will never forget the feeling of Harriet's small hand in mine, dry and trusting. And I turned to her, slowing our pace. She looked up at me with her enormous blue eyes, and she seemed to wait. I said, Harriet, tu sais, il y a quelque chose de très grave qui m'est arrivé. Je t'aime. Je t'aime. Tu me comprends, or shall I say it in English? So that's the passage. And I love this particular passage. And I don't know what you all feel about it. I think there's an interesting masculinist tendency in this sense of possibility and openness. I think that's an interesting aspect of it, but I'm really taken by the way in which Baldwin's narrator, because he doesn't have a name, as you must have seen, but this narrator doesn't feel now constrained by the world. And I don't know how you all read that, and if that seemed to be an important passage from your points of view. I don't know, but I think for me it is. And I think he sets it up with scenery, and it's a stage setting for me, and that speaks to its ecstasy in my point of view. I don't know. So I invite you all to comment on it if you have any thoughts on it.
Here is your bridge. Can you see that? Do you see your
No.
bridge?
The bridge. I don't see it.
Oh,
The bridge?
there's
I don't
James
see it.
Baldwin. No?
Oh, the Pont Royal, you mean?
Yes.
I don't see
You've
it.
got
Yeah.
it up. You've got it up there.
Yes, there
Do
it
you see
is.
it?
Oh, but I don't see it either.
No, I don't
Okay,
either.
let me.
Oh, is it at the bottom or?
Oh, I think it's,
Let
what
me
we see
stop
are the,
share. Hold on, let me
Okay.
try again.
okay.
Is that
Yeah,
showing
there
it?
There it is. There it
There's
is.
the
Yeah,
bridge.
that's the bridge. That's the bridge. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Welcome.
Okay.
This is James
So,
Baldwin, in case you didn't know what he looked like. There's the bridge.
so that's one of these old bridges in Paris, and they're standing there. It's like a stage set. And I wonder what you all do you how do you read that passage? Is it do you find it particularly meaningful or
May,
um
may I say something?
Please, Darwin.
Okay,
yeah.
it almost goes back to, I interpret it, it almost goes back to the word Negro again. That passage is he's saying, I'm a human being, I'm a man, I'm not looked as something different as in America. I'm not an American, I'm different because I'm a Negro, but on the same token, I am an American, so I'm no different from white America. And over in Paris, he can feel that, but he couldn't feel it in America.
Right. Yes. He's not, the world hasn't stepped in and blocked off the possibility of a profound human relationship with another person, because race, as he says someplace else a couple of times, races, armies, and churches aren't standing in the way. The
Correct.
quarrel that they couldn't achieve, they can achieve now in this place. They can achieve that quarrel. And so there's a way in which you've got, it's a grand stage set it's the sun. You've got the statue of Joan of Arc. There are millions of people, but I can see the camera moving in. The millions of people are there, but the camera's moving in on these two individuals who are looking each other in the eyes. And they are whole human beings. And
Right.
that I think is the point. That
We're
is
not
what,
human.
yeah, they're fully human.
Yeah.
And they're not blocked by inventions of who they are. So they can love each other now. I think I don't want to belabor it, but I do want to just have you look at the next page where and I don't know if I'm going too quickly, but this is on your page 160.
Yeah.
He's on the boat going back to the States. And so he sings. He's going to sing on this boat. It's just this one paragraph sort of there. The moment I stepped out on the floor. Do you see that paragraph?
Yep, right here.
Okay. The moment I stepped out on the floor, they began to smile. Something opened in them. They were ready to be pleased. I found in their faces, as they watched me smiling, waiting, an artless relief, a profound reassurance. Nothing was more familiar to them than the sight of a dark boy singing, and there were few things on earth more necessary. It was under cover of darkness, my own darkness, that I could sing for them of the joys, passions, and terrors they smuggled about with them like steadily depreciating contraband. Under cover of the midnight fiction that I was unlike them because I was Black, they could stealthily gaze at those treasures which they had been mysteriously forbidden to possess and were never permitted to declare. That for me is the other end of
It's the flip side.
that's the flip side. And that's what Toni Morrison writes about in her book, Playing in the Dark. Now, I guess I'm just going to say this. I could imagine that some white Americans would feel that this is not quite them, that this is not them. And I think I would be interested in hearing how people respond to this. But it does seem to me that Baldwin is here making a fictional case for what happens when white Americans don't step up to the truth of what has enabled their wealth, their beautiful homes, their riches, their advancement, their superiority, supposed superiority. When they don't grapple with that, they are they are in fact fully engaging with all of the emotions that could be presented by the singer on the stage, but they can't avow it somehow. It's beneath them, or it tarnishes them. That's what Baldwin is saying. And I don't know how people feel about that, but I think that's really what he's arguing. And I'm really struck by it. So it's a passage I bring up in my class, Black Paris. And I'll just say that I said to the students one day, so if it's not a singing black boy, what other kind of black boy is it? And they all said, a basketball player.
Right.
That's the other thing, the sports. So I'm going to, okay, withdraw a little bit and let you all go forward. So that's, yeah, I don't know. I think those are the two extremes there.
Just sit with it for a little.
That's a role.
It's a role.
That's yeah. I was thinking to that's a role. That's a role that's acceptable for them.
Yeah.
That's a role that's acceptable for them. Like Mammy's role in Gone with the Wind it's an acceptable role for them. Them, not the Americans, the other ones. It's an acceptable role.
Yeah, but it's acceptable because it's not threatening, but it
Yes.
also is a kind of, for the white people who are watching, it's an expression of something that they deny themselves, and they impose, they just, because they, and this is where The Fire Next Time is so intricate and powerful. He really gets more into, it's an essay, not a short story, but what is it that, what are the components of whiteness in America? And, you know, it's when he talks about American innocence, it's a kind of, Henry James wrote about American innocence as a problem. Hawthorne and Melville both did, but they didn't take race into account. And when he talks about Americans' innocence in the letter to his nephew on the centennial of the Emancipation Proclamation, he says what it means is you don't acknowledge the devastation that you have wrought. And the crime of not acknowledging is the worst crime of all. I'm paraphrasing of that. And what he means is the whole history of enslavement, exploitation, racism, and white supremacy. And I think for me, I think particularly as a white person, one of the most powerful aspects of this writing is how insightful and unrelenting he is about what this isn't the right word, but the immaturity, he does say that, the infantileness, the impoverishment of how whiteness is created and experienced by white people in America. Because it kind of, he says at one point it's schizophrenic. It cuts off part of yourself and projects it onto Black people, Negroes, as he says. So you can't, and why do we do that? Because we don't want to face the real past. We have these myths about America's the greatest country in the world, as he says. All American men are virile and heroic, and all American women, these are all white, of course, are chaste. This is the 1960s. But it's childlike. I mean, I told Eileen, for me, one of the most, I don't know, how many of you have seen the film now, I Am Not Your Negro? Did anybody get to watch that? Okay. So there are a lot of horrifying parts of it to me, but one of the most horrifying is actually Doris Day and Gary Cooper dancing. Because he compares it with Ray Charles, and he says they're kind of two opposites almost. They can't come together. But they are like caricatures of people. And one of the things he accuses, well, critiques white America for is for pursuing happiness, which is superficial. It's what is happiness? Wealth, security, the idea that things will always stay the same, that you can achieve a dream that's mainly material and very protected. When Baldwin recognizes that life is, there's what he calls reality, it's tragic, that means that we die, but we have to kind of create the world for the future. But it's also one of the things that he respects but doesn't sentimentalize about African Americans or Negroes in America is that the suffering and the witnessing of history and the experience of history have been essential to that life for 400 years. The real history is the history, as we're seeing now in a lot of ways with the 1619 Project, of slavery, forced labor, the building of white wealth, expansion, all of the things that in the kind of textbook history that I learned, and I'm sure many other people learned back in grade school, was just a really triumphant narrative of the country is just getting better and better, and it's bringing democracy to the world. Baldwin is kind of resituating that. So from the beginning, and I think he mentions Jamestown, this country was built as a society that was black and white. It doesn't really work Native Americans into it so much, but it was built on the power that whites had to create whiteness and blackness, and to each one is defined in terms of the other. So we, for a long time, white people didn't think, I think probably after maybe the 1940s into the early 2000s, most white people didn't think they had a race. They just were people. Other people had a race. It's kind of what Eileen was saying with the hyphenated Americans too. White people are Americans, and then there are all those other kinds of Americans. So Baldwin is writing this in 1960, and he's saying, you know what?
Does anybody
Go ahead, Eileen. Guy.
Does anybody remember having a box of crayons, and one of the crayons was labeled flesh? That was
I
my
remember that.
color.
They were pink. Yeah, they were pink. They were pinkish.
Pink.
Yeah,
And I just bought flesh-colored bandages a couple of months ago at Drug Mart. Same thing. There weren't any other colors for flesh. So, it persists in a lot of ways. You can see it all around you. But, and he also says that one of the advantages that the Negro, and I'm going to say just Negro, but you'll see quotations around it, has had is that the Negro has always been able to observe white people and has had to know white people. But white people have never known the Negro, really. They've done what Eileen was saying, imposing this kind of type. But so Byron, you said something really interesting many interesting things. But one of the most interesting, and I'm not going to get your exact words, was something about, I had said that Baldwin is really insisting that he's American. And do you see hope for America at the fire next time? I know Eddie Glaude thinks that he becomes less hopeful, but in what we read.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always think about with Baldwin, the reason why I like The Fire Next Time so much, and Baldwin's work is that, Baldwin reminds me often that, and I think this speaks to where we are now also, and thinking about the passage that you read, Dr. Julian, for me, I think Baldwin's always reminding us is that, we can't predicate our politics on changing, people's minds and souls, right? And Eddie and Glaude makes that really clear in his work, right? In his study of Baldwin, and he talks about that quite a bit. You can hear Glaude talking about that when he's on MSNBC, right? That's one of the main things he looks at, and this goes back to my point of really thinking about Baldwin chastising America, right? If you listen to his talks, right, with his recorded talks with like Nikki Giovanni, right? He really goes to terms. He's walking through Harlem and talking about what's happened to Harlem. It's always a chastisement of America. But I think the other part is, this notion of, identifying ourselves by looking through the white gaze also, right? And I think that's why that part that you read was so powerful. That for Black folk, does that gaze disappear when we have the opportunity to make that gaze disappear, right? And I think that becomes important about this notion of self-identifying and self-empowerment also. And then putting that in the conversation, the context with who we are now, and thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, this notion of of empowering yourself with that understanding of, I can't necessarily change the way you think about me or how you see me, because that disempowers me. And I think that's a lot of where Baldwin was going throughout his writing. And you know, I didn't read the story because I just, you know, Molly sent me the invite this morning, so I was aware of the setup for it. So I'm really happy to be here, though. You know, when I saw Dr. Julian, I was like, oh, I got to come to this and hear what she's going to say. But you know, it's really important, I think, to think about. For me, Baldwin's always been important to help me with self-identifying and self-empowerment, and the fact that also Baldwin was queer also helps me to identify and empower myself as well with who I am and how I move through this world. And being able to, you know, understand that I can have these types of relationships. I can be on that bridge with someone in Paris. And you know, the other world. No, Molly just sent me a message. Sorry, it was a late invitation. I'm just happy. You know, to be able to identify and not have that burden. And I think this is the thing that I really got out of the film also, I Am Not Your Negro. You know, when he talks about how we look at these notions of beauty, and how he talks, the part where he talks about Joan Crawford, right? And seeing these people as beautiful. You know, and the implicit danger in that for Black folk. You know, I sent Dr. Julian, I sent you a message and asked if you had seen Marlon Riggs' Ethnic Notions.
Oh, ethnic notions.
Yeah. It's old now, right? It's like 10 years old or something.
Oh, more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that I've seen that then.
Yeah, and that whole notion of, you know, these representations of ourselves, right? And how we're seeing through the white eye. And the empowerment comes from when we finally are able to escape that gaze and understand that I can't necessarily change the way you see me, but give me my equity. You know, I want my equity, right? And I think that's really where Baldwin is headed in a lot of his work, right? Before DEI became this thing, right? I could say a lot about the diversity and inclusion part of that because I don't like those terms, but the equity part, yes. But I think, you know, for Baldwin's important to me because it really makes me think about, you know, that illusion of what Blackness is, right? And through the white gaze. But you know, the beauty and power in that is understanding that, you know, that burden doesn't fall on me. Burden falls on those who don't like me, right? So you know, I tend to go on too long. I'm sorry. I know this is only an hour, so I'll be quiet.
It's okay.
This is Dr. Julian inspired me.
We have hit 3 o'clock, so I don't know if Dr. Julian and Dr. Zagarel would like to say some closing remarks, or if anybody else has something to say.
If anybody else has any first before we.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, we're going to have a question at the very end, which is.
Oh boy.
So, no, it's not a hard question. It's just something to think about. But I want to say, you know, I can't read Baldwin and think it speaks to my self-empowerment at all. It's searing for me and really very effective. But at least in The Fire Next Time, I also see, well, we were talking about this, but I think there's something incredibly generous here. First of all, in writing what he writes, because I mean, this is published, some of this in places like The Atlantic, right? He's writing for a broad audience.
He is.
And in Down at the Cross, a lot of that, it kind of tacks back and forth between what, quote, Negro life has been made to be like, and what white Americans, who they are, what the disabilities that they have imposed on themselves are. But he also says, and I think you have this, it's on 339 at the bottom, if you want to put it up, in my copy, which is the Library of America copy. So, but I can read it. What I'm going to read is short.
Read it.
Hitting
Read
buttons.
it.
I shouldn't be hitting.
Jennifer, let me just read it.
Okay.
He says, So the Negro's position here has been horrendous. He has struggled to defeat, and he uses the masculine, to defeat the stratagems that white Americans have used and use to deny him his humanity. America, so he moves here not just to Negroes, but to all of America. He means white America, but also a potential America, I think. America could have used in other ways the energy that both groups have expended in this conflict. The whole country is just, for different reasons and in different ways, held captive to this and unable to fulfill itself as a country. America, and this is the part that just amazes me, America, of all the Western nations, has been best placed to prove the uselessness and the obsolescence of the concept of color, but it has not dared to accept this opportunity or often to conceive of it as an opportunity. And here's white Americans. What is the opportunity? What are we placed in this unusual, unique situation of? We are a race, a nation that is not homogeneous racially. We have two major races when he's writing, and we have a history that if we come to terms with, and it's not the part of Black people to teach us, it's up to us to learn about it and to learn what we have denied in ourselves, which is the destructiveness, but also kind of limited our humanity by being that way and being afraid of recognizing it, then we could become a truly wonderful nation. What an opportunity. Think of England in 1960, or even France, though the colonial wars are starting to go on, but it's not, and he writes about that, but it's not the kind of racially mixed country that this country was founded as being and has continued to be. And then at the end, you know, the last pages of this article essay are really dense and inspiring, but he says, basically he's saying, if America goes on the way it is, it's going to be destroyed. But he doesn't mean that there are going to be riots. He means that it's going to rot. That it's going to really, the destructiveness to everybody is just going to make it collapse in some way, not fulfill its potential, but you can't stand still. So it's going to deteriorate even more. What goes up must come down. And I'm reading at the very end. And here we are at the center of the arc. So we're at the peak of what America could be. This is probably writes it in 1963, trapped in the gaudiest, most valuable, and most improbable water the world has ever seen, because he's used this image of a wheel paddle wheel. Even now, everything now we must assume is in our hands. And this hour reaches out to everyone. We have no right to assume otherwise. If we, and now I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious Blacks, who must, like lovers, so think about those lovers quarreling, insist on or create the consciousness of the others. If we do not falter in our duty, it's our duty now, we may be able to change things. We may be able, handful that we are, to end the racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world. So there's that incredible opportunity that most white Americans certainly, and maybe almost everybody, doesn't recognize as an opportunity, but that's not where he ends. And if we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated from the Bible in song by a slave, is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, the fire next time. We'll be destroyed if we don't do something about this racial horrendousness that is our country. But he's teaching his readers what it is to be white, what it has been to be white, how fragile and destructive that is, and demeaning, actually, and what it is to be Negro in America and have been, and what history we have to face before we can go forward. So the past isn't past, it's not dead, but we have to grapple with it. It's not fated to just create who we are now or in the future. So that's how I read this. I mean, there's a lot more there, but I see it as incredibly powerful. Doesn't give us any answers. It's up to us.
True. Eileen, did you want to say anything?
I think that was a beautiful, I don't know if it's a conclusion, but a set of thoughts
Yes.
with which to go forward. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, so much more to be said. And Baldwin himself, in my view, is not perfect. I think, you know, that there are things he gets wrong, but that's okay. He's grappling. And one of the things I would want to say in this short story, as in The Fire Next Time, these are not ideas that he's gotten, you know, and got his outline, okay, A point, B point, C point. No, he's not summing up an argument before the court. And I love this in him, as in Frantz Fanon, he's thinking. It is, the whole story, in fact, is a monologue. This guy is thinking. He starts at the beginning of the day, this, and then this, and then this, and he's thinking all the way through, and he's pulling things from before and projecting things in the future. I mean, this is a man thinking, trying to grapple, and that's how he writes. That's who he is, and I love that in him. And there's some critiques I would make too, but I'll save the critiques for our next encounter. But I just thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so thankful for all of you that have come today. Thank you very much for listening and learning. I know for me, this is a lot of learning going on. I was telling Sandy, I'm reading and learning and trying to make change. So, and I really want to say thank you to Eileen and Sandy for their work, facilitating us today and giving us the reading recommendations. I will let you know that if you didn't get a chance to read it, the items are still available. The I Am Not Your Negro movie is on Hoopla. So if you have a library card with Sandusky Library, you can watch that.
You all just froze.
Oh. Okay. Are we back? We're all sitting there, all just sitting. We still got you, Eileen. But thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Especially on a Saturday afternoon. So thank you. And we hope to continue. Yes, we hope to continue these conversations in the future. So we welcome you back anytime and have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Dr. Julian.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks, everyone.
coming. Thank you so much.
I'm Ollie.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Sandusky.
Bye. Thank you, Byron, for joining us from Illinois.
Oh, this is wonderful. Dr. Julian, good to see you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Sarah, thanks for your email earlier this year. Remember, you emailed me because you had gotten that statue. Oh, she's frozen.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, Sarah, okay. Oh, we'll talk later. Can't hear her. Do you want to just do a very brief kind of reflection before we?
Sure.
So
See, Sarah's on her way out.
Yeah.
Not sure what Darwit's doing.
Oh,
Eileen, are you still there? Eileen, are you still there?
Eileen?
We lose her at the end.
She's trying.
Oh, bye-bye. I can't see or hear you, but it's been a great pleasure. Oh, we lost her.
I can see her, but she's holding her phone like she wants to talk, but she can't.
Right. Well, we can chat on the phone later, Sandy.
All right. Sarah, it's good to see you. We'll see you, I hope, soon. Take good care.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.